So welcome everybody. It's great to have you all here, and it's wonderful to have our esteemed panelists with us join today. We're going to be talking about sustainable architecture, urban planning, and how there's an intersection between design, innovation, renewable energy transition, and also adaptation, and how we need to adapt our architecture and our communities and build environment to the effects of climate change. So this should be a great discussion. We have a brilliant lineup of panelists. Wanted to start off maybe with each of you just giving a little bit of an introduction to your role, the areas that you're specialized in. So maybe we can start off with you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. I am Engineer Khaled Bati, Chairman of Housing Department. My background is in urban planning. I'm an urban planner and a scientific researcher in hydrology and urban floods.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Severance. I'm the Director of Growth for Masdar City. And whenever I talk to people like this, I always like to ask one question. How many of you have visited Masdar City? I love this group. This is my favorite my favorite group of the day. You are the best, because this way I don't have to say anything. You've been out there and you've seen it and you've felt it and you've experienced it. And so for the 3 people who have not been there in this crowd, I would love to have you come visit Masdar City at your nearest opportunity. In fact, we're running electric buses every day between Expo and Masdar City, so you don't have to listen to us. Just go get on a bus and go see it. Stay and listen to us first, though.
I'm Azza Zaabi, the Associate Director of Integrated Facilities Management in Solutions Plus, a Mubadala company. I'm an architect and urban planner by background and by profession as well. And I'm responsible to manage the operations of the facilities under the portfolio of management of Solutions Plus.
Good afternoon. My name is Sumaya Dabbar. I'm the founder of Dabbar Architects. I'm a Saudi architect based here in Dubai, and my practice focuses really on themes of identity, memory of place, and we have done a number of cultural projects in the UAE. Maleha Archaeological Center is one, and we are now working on a museum in Al Ain. Thank you for inviting me.
Fantastic. So we have a great combination here. Speakers who can talk about urban planning, the master picture. We can talk about the actual developers of a sustainable city like Masdar City. And we can also look at the perspective from a facilities management company and also the architecture and design. So starting off with you, Your Excellency, I had a question about urban planning and the topic of adaptation. So whilst we are looking at mitigation of climate effects through renewable energies, through decarbonization, we also need to plan for the negative effects of climate change. So could you tell us a little bit about some of those negative effects and your area of expertise in planning?
Thank you. That's a very important question indeed. Urban planning is it's a very important stage in designing and thinking about the future of the built environment, including infrastructure and human. And while building the environment and developing our cities, many issues rise up like phenomena. One of them, which I was studying and investigating, is urban floods. And we found that urban floods have a repetitive events in the last years. And what we mean by an urban flood, it's just an amount or an excessive amount of water due to rain or snow that submerge the surface of the ground in a capacity higher than this area to drain it either naturally or through the hydrological systems. It's usually combined with impacts that could be as minimum as just a disturbance of a daily life and as big as a death. So within that range, a lot of issues and impacts can be categorized. We found that a lot of factors need to be considered while planning and thinking about the future of the cities. it's about the efficiency of the storm drainage network. The pattern of urban planning, the land use that can impact or cause urban floods as we run off of runoff areas. Also in urban planning, we think about the surrounding changes like the climate change. Now we have a trend of a higher intensity of precipitation, and that came in a very short period and submerged the environment. And another cause of higher intensities is the cloud seeding as well. We know this is a very noble program to increase the amount of water in our region, but it has also a side effects. And finally, the procedures adopted by the local authorities in managing and controlling the network. All these are issues need to be considered while thinking about the built environment and how to minimize the impact of urban floods.
Thank you. We'll come back to that in a little bit. I wanted to move to you, Sumaya. So obviously you are an expert in the intersection between innovative design, desirable architecture, and environmentally friendly buildings. So when you're considering that, what are the specific approaches that you're now taking? Is it something that you've found that you've pivoted towards in your practice, that you're now moving to more sustainable architecture? And tell us a little bit more about what that involves so that we can still continue to live in beautiful homes, beautiful buildings, but that are environmentally friendly.
Thank you, Nada. I mean, I think coming to the region, having been away in UK studying, I really noticed how, most of these Gulf cities, I'm from Saudi Arabia, but most of the Gulf cities have developed very fast in a short period of time. But they've adopted a lot of Western architecture. There's a lot of imported architecture, a lot of glass. And I think not just Western architecture, but in a way a little bit Western values, because I think what happened in a very short piece of time, we lost that connection to place, we lost that connection to the land. And I think architecture can be a vehicle to really reconnect. If by responding to the context, by responding to the culture, the climate, I think all of these elements can, which are not felt. I mean, we're talking about a physical environment, but also there's the intangible elements that are felt through experiences, through memories of place, that are really important to give us a sense of connection and belonging. And I mean, I know that yes, it's 2023 and it's we're moved to modernity, but I think there's a real opportunity to connect to our heritage through some very simple and tried and tested vernacular, sustainable methodology, being local, using local materials as much as possible. All of these things which our grandparents did created a connection to place, and we've lost that in a way. And now really what we're trying to do is find a contemporary way to address that. So reinterpreting these things, using modern materials as much as possible. We'll try to use local, encouraging local industries in that way. So it's a whole ecosystem that really comes from that connection to place that can be created, and it has a ripple effect across many sectors in the industry, just from that starting point, and that's where we like to start. Thank you.
Yeah, and you were also talking earlier about the influence of nature as well, and observing nature, working with nature, and letting that influence the architecture as well.
Yes, I think responding to place, responding to what, or just to go back one step, when you feel a sense of connection and belonging, that's to your whole environment, built and natural. And once you have that, you really start to care about where you are, and you start to care about caring about the place and caring, not littering, for instance, and all of these behaviors and a mindset that starts to shift when you really have that sense of connection and belonging and love for the land. I think that's how I think it starts.
Thank you. Moving on to Azza. So you are coming at this from the perspective of integrated facilities management. So you manage single buildings, clusters, you look after the master planning as well as facilities management. So that's a slightly different perspective when it comes to sustainability. Could you tell us a little bit about the challenges when it comes to the economic, social, and environmental impacts?
Well, when we start the process of shaping the built environment from the very beginning of the initiation stage and just coming with the purpose, with the objective and the focus, what is the plan taking us to, until when? What is the horizon of the community that we are going to develop? Is it for the upcoming 5 or 10 or 20 years or even beyond? That's the first element that we really need to be careful in identifying at the very beginning. Then we look at all the different attributes that shape up the built environment, be it the economic aspect, the social, and the environmental aspect as well. All these criteria come together in a way that we need to look at all the different perspectives from the different stakeholders throughout the process of shaping and designing, the overall plan. And it has to be a deep engagement with all the stakeholders related to this development, whether it's a small community or a single building or just a city in itself. Now, when we go through the process itself, the challenge that we might face is basically to find the right balance between all these three elements. Is it the economic factor that we have to focus on with jeopardizing the other sides of the equation? Is it that we need to put the right balance to create a self-sustained city? Because sustainable city is basically about a city that has its own resources in within, and it can operate for the near and long terms as well. It has to have the purpose for the next generations, not only to be focusing on the short-termism more than the long-term view. Where does it take us from an environmental perspective, social perspective, and also economic perspective? So that is honestly the challenge, but also the beauty of how you are planning for an entire city. You need to, at some point, that you need to segregate and then start to integrate. You need to distill all the individual elements of each factor to identify what would be the risk, what would be the opportunity from each element, and then start articulating those into building masses, into a tangible result. Now, and then ultimately, it's a CDM approach, which is a collaborative decision-making across the room between all the stakeholders to decide upon the pathway that we have to move forward for the long term to develop the city. Now, to Sumayya's point, that the disconnection happened throughout maybe the architecture and urban boom that the whole region went through, and that disconnection honestly made us lose the authentic elements of how environmental friendly is our indigenous architecture, be it from an urban scale to a single building perspective. And now it's, I believe, the phase that we're going back on track. Happily, we are not late, and we are introducing all sorts of measures, whether it's from a policy making, regulations, statutory bodies, reformation of guidelines, from an urban scale to power generation, to occupancy pattern into the buildings, and to even small tools and technology introduced in the individual buildings. So I can see from a facilities, from individual building to an urban planning scale, it's both-way traffic. It's how we ensure the success of this sustainability agenda is basically by two streams speaking to each other. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I think we do kind of discuss on this panel the difference between retrofitting what we already have to make it decarbonized and building from scratch. So that is a great segue to you, Stephen. 2009, you know, when Basdar City was first launched, and you know, the world kind of looked at it and said, "This, how is this even going to be possible?" It seemed like a really ambitious feat. I'm sure there's a lot of learnings along the way. I'm sure there's a lot of challenges as well. Comparing those days to now, in terms of if a developer was starting from scratch and creating a completely renewable, sustainable city, what sort of advice would you give? What sort of learnings would you have?
Well, I mean, I want to follow up just on a couple of things that were said earlier in the panel. I like how we're asking about adaptation, which in this climate for COP means, okay, are we doing things to adapt to the reality that there is climate change? I think most of you live here. Most of you have been here in July and August. The idea that if we asked architects 300 years ago, are you adapting to the climate you're in? They would have said, of course we're adapting to the climate we're in. Of course we're adapting. We use master planning and we use building technology and we use building design to adapt to where we are. And what brings about a sense of place. One of my favorite pictures, and I've shown it on stage 100 times, it's Shibam in Yemen. And that is what they call Manhattan of the desert. And it's built here because it's been hot here for a long time. My mother handed me a book a couple years ago, and it's about my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's trip overland from India to London when he was being reassigned back. He was going back to London, and he went through, and he wrote about Muscat. And he said, it is so hot that it is almost uninhabitable for humans. No one in their right mind goes out during the middle of the day. And he wrote this in 1879. So it's been hot here for a while. And it's exactly you said, it's not just Western architecture that's done this. They've done the same thing in their own countries. We do the exact same building in Abu Dhabi as we do in New York City, as we do in Phoenix, Arizona, as we do in Rio de Janeiro, as we do in Tokyo. And then we just add more heating or air conditioning. So we need to start with that blank piece of paper and say, how would you build this city? How would you plan it if we didn't have air conditioning? How would you plan it to adapt to the climate you're in? I met with a university from Northern Europe, and lots of people come out to Masdar City to say, how would we do this? And he said, yeah, because we shifted the whole city to create wind flow. We actually have specific buildings to increase the wind flow through the city to make it more comfortable when you're outdoors year round. And he said, yeah, we just dropped 2 big buildings into our university. It creates such wind flow in Northern Europe that it is freezing to walk there many more days of the year than it needs to be. It's because they don't think about it either. It's why the building's great. The building's perfectly functional. Once you're inside, the building performs like it's supposed to. But they didn't think, how would that change the urban environment by adding that? And so we need that real holistic thinking about what does the master plan need to look like, and then what do the buildings need to look like. And I'd say, to me, yes, what's the difference between 2009 and now? In 2009, when I joined Masdar City 14 years ago, nobody else in the region was talking about sustainability. You could do all kinds of projects without a sustainability agenda. And but other developers have come along. You live in sustainable cities here. And now every single mega project, of which this region leads the world in mega projects, talks about the sustainability agenda, whether it's Expo itself here that we're in, whether it's projects in Saudi Arabia, whether it was the World Cup in Qatar, that this region has come around and said, hey, we can do sustainability. And I'd really like to think Masdar City served as a catalyst for that. That all those groups have come out and seen, what have we done at Masdar City? How do we think with the blank piece of paper and say, I want to be sustainable, and yes, economically as well. We are a Mubadala company. Any of our shareholder here? Our returns are fantastic. We're doing great, but we're demonstrating, because no one else would come along and do it with us if we didn't have the required return. And no one else would come along and do it with us if our buildings weren't full, if people didn't want to live in this place, if people didn't want to have their offices there. We need to be able to deliver sustainability for the environment, for the economy, and for the people that are living there.
So what I'm hearing so far from our panelists is it's all very well maybe having one sustainable community or one sustainable home, building, but if we haven't thought about the overall urban planning for that entire city, there's a bit of a disconnect, and that's both for mitigation and adaptation. So back to you again, Your Excellency. You're in a position at the moment where you're Department of Housing for Sharjah Executive Council, and you're looking at this theme of adaptation to the new climate, to the new challenges. So how does that even work? You know, when you have your entire city, and you're trying to sort of think years ahead for future generations, for urban planning to mitigate the effects of the flooding, for example. What sort of practices help with that big picture approach to urban planning?
Talking about the future development of a city, it entails huge responsibility on the planner or the urban planner himself. So I think point number one we need to highlight is that this is a specialized field, required specialized experts to work in. So urban planner should have deep knowledge in his field so that he can perform his job and duty. But it is not just a duty, it's a responsibility in guiding the future of the city. So the urban planner should be comprehensive in his thinking. He should accept judgment and criticism from other experts, and we should learn from other experiences. It's all about lessons learned. So when we think about urban planning, we think about, first of all, the human living in this area and what is required or what's his requirements, and then how we can design the built environment in a sustainable way that will not impact other fields. For example, engineers can derive very, very solid ideas, but when you criticize it or think about it, it could not be feasible or could impact other fields. So we should integrate other fields or other specialties while we are planning the city. The environmentalist is very important. People who are thinking about community security is very important. Engage the scientific researchers, especially the smart cities, where we able to cluster a lot of ideas in the same location. And finally, we have to simulate these scenarios using new techniques, adapting to the capabilities of the advancement in artificial intelligence, remote sensing. If we model the city and we examine scenarios, I think that will lead us to a very balanced plan that could respond to human requirement and respect environment and other aspects of the society.
Thank you. I'm really interested in this topic of technology and the role of technology, smart cities, and I'll come to you now, Azza. So obviously from an integrated facilities management perspective, I'd love you to just share a little bit about the challenges and opportunities in urban planning, and in particular where you see innovation coming in, whether that's reducing carbon footprint, whether it's using new technologies to help decarbonize our built environment and increase sustainability.
Nada, some cases that from a facility management perspective, sometimes when you just take over the operation of, any building, sometimes those buildings are not built to the standards of, being compatible with the sustainability WELL or LEED standards when it comes to being efficient in operating. So, and here comes the role of technology. Here comes the role of retrofit, although, retrofit, as we know, could be expensive. But when it comes to really transforming the built environment to be adaptable and to be compatible with the sustainability standards is something that I wouldn't say only from Solutions Plus as facility management, but we are really, this is our value add wherever we get the, the management for a facility. We introduce what are the possible measures that we can enhance the operations of the building so it becomes environmentally friendly, occupant friendly, economically viable, and is not really impacting the strategic objective of the operating organization. So here comes, our technology introductions of certain tools that we introduced. For example, we were able to introduce certain measures in the water consumption and reuse in some of the buildings that we manage, which attributed to a saving of more than 5,000 cubic liters per day. Some of them we have been able to reduce the power consumption by 5% compared to the previous year. So these, immediate intervention that we apply to these buildings to at least make it cope up with the sustainability agenda from a bigger scale, it's something that we are really looking at from facilities perspective, knowing that the portfolio of the buildings that we are managing is exponentially growing. From last year to this year, we have triple-folded the amount of gross floor area that we are managing. You are talking about some facilities from the healthcare sector that we are managing have more than 30,000 patients per month. So these figures puts the responsibility of the sustainability agenda from Solutions Plus to provide value in these buildings is very important aspect, and it's all cascaded down also from the strategic objectives. Now, whether it's a challenge, I think we look at it from an opportunity perspective, because the sky is the limit, honestly, when it comes to implementing sustainability measures, and to make sure that again we're not jeopardizing the social and economic aspects of the equation.
So there's a couple of things I want to touch on there. Maybe Steve, we can cover the topic, and Sumaya, of affordability. So you've obviously had the experience with Masdar City. A really innovative community, and Sumaya, you work on the most incredible innovative architectural designs. Is there a price point for sustainable living? Do you think, in your view, that that this is only affordable by a certain demographic, or are we going to see it in the mainstream? And my second part of that question is, what comes first, supply or demand? So, is it going to be we will build it and they will come, or does it have to be the other way around?
Can I just start? I mean, I think in terms of innovation, there's huge opportunities to innovate new construction materials, which have started, really encouraging that there are. And I think, again, why we are innovating, yes, to reduce carbon footprint, but also I think a really important role is to create this connection. For instance, there is a factory in Abu Dhabi that is taking palm fronds, which are normally burnt, they're discarded, and they're making boards from it. So it's a recycled material, it's a very strong material, but innovations like that, and there are others. There are people experimenting with the seeds of dates to make sort of a kind of a concrete base. So there are a lot of innovation happening, and I think just needs to, it's at the beginning, and once it starts to become adapted and used, there is meaning to these materials when they come from the region. So to use something that is made out of palm, and the palm tree is very close to us, it's kind of the source of our livelihoods. So to use a material like that you have a different connection to than, for instance, using an imported wood that came from Sweden. So it's these innovation that is directed to really to serve us in terms of using materials that are local to us, that has more meaning to us. And I think that direction is very exciting, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I'd like to follow on to something Azza said, but then bring in together what you mentioned about technology and affordability. And I think this technology needs to be applied with the right use cases for affordability. So a few years ago at Master City, we did a study about 200 government buildings in Abu Dhabi, and we said, okay, what can we do to reduce the consumption of energy in the buildings? How do we make these buildings more efficient? Is it new lighting systems? Is it new window systems? Is it new elevators? And the number one thing we found, clean the air filters. Clean the air filters was the biggest, fastest improvement you could make, including up to 20% reduction in air conditioning just by cleaning the air filters. It's a bit the same of saying, okay, I want to biohack my body. I'm going to become the best possible. I'm going to use, artificial intelligence to make my body amazing. Do you think I should quit smoking first? Well, why don't you quit smoking and eating McDonald's before you say, okay, now I'm going to biohack my body? And that's what we think about Master City. That also brings in the affordability into the tech to this, because when we think we can do LEED Platinum buildings, which is the highest level, international level of the U.S. Green Building Council. For those of you who are not as into LEED buildings as I am, but we believe that we can do this for about a 2% cost premium, which easily comes back in the operational savings there. And we do that with a blank piece of paper. And we set out and say, how do you do this? Because we do believe that sustainability is for everyone. In fact, our tagline on the net zero building that we just completed just before COP, the first at-scale commercial building in the region that's net zero, is net zero for all. Our office space is completely sold out. I mean, I can probably get you 100 square meters or 200 square meters if you talk to me after as a special. But seriously, we are full. And the reason is because we're exceptionally competitive economically. I mean, I'll ask you guys a question in the crowd. You guys all bought a house, leased a house, an apartment here. How many of you asked, and we're at COP28 right now. We're not just out on the street. You are the most environmentally interested people in the UAE because you're here with us. How many of you asked about the environmental rating on your apartment or house before you leased it or bought it? How many of you asked about the size and what the kitchen looks like and how many parking spots there were? That's where we are in reality in the UAE. So if we want to continue to perform, we need to deliver at a price point where everyone says, oh, sustainability does not cost me more. Sustainability is something that Master City can deliver, and we can deliver that at a price point that you can all come afford to live at Master City. You can afford to have your office there, and that's because we use technology and use cases. Now, I think there's a lot of promise in technology, and if we're going to get to net zero, we're going to need to integrate a lot more smart grid. We're going to need to integrate both. Also, I love the idea of new ways of using traditional materials. That's absolutely amazing. So when you come out to Master City, one of the things we want you to see is a sense of place and a sense of purpose for what we're doing. So we take the technology and we layer it on top. It's not the base case, because if you make technology your base case, it will absolutely not be affordable. If your whole business case is based on a great new technology, no, we layer the technology on top where it can get us incremental gains. And so we keep continuing to push the boundaries, and we layer the technologies on top. But things like electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, that are part of our mobility, that are just so important for our mobility strategy, but it gets layered on top to the base case of passive design.
Thank you.
If you would allow me to add a point on the sustainability and affordability of houses or built environment. We are thinking mainly about alternative materials and how they can save the cost. And these materials still in the research and development, and it is subjected to the acceptance of people. Would they accept these material or not? But there are other options we can examine while talking about affordability. It's the size of the housing unit or the working or building unit, the facilities available. Do we need a garden in each house, or we can share a common park in the neighborhood? The efficiency of using energy, electricity and water. This is a very important. The requirement of the family. Would a requirement of a small family made up or husband and wife, maybe 1 or 2 kids, it's similar to those who have 7 or 8. So we need to think about it while designing and managing and operating the environment. And this is one of the solutions, is about options, not about introducing new materials, despite the importance of that field.
By the way, I mean, I think this would be an issue for you as well, too, because a lot of the housing you're providing is for UAE nationals. And all electricity is subsidized for UAE nationals. So when you build inefficient houses, that's a cost for the government that's built into the lifetime of the house. The Minister of Energy was out over the weekend here, and he said the same thing. He's like, we need to build very efficient houses for UAE nationals so that we reduce the energy consumption so that the government is not paying for that for the lifetime of the house.
Yeah, and now we are looking for LEED certified buildings. Even for the initial stages, we are looking for the heating system, how to be sustainable, or depends on the solar panels, and how we can be effective in water consumption as well.
So
we're here to help.
So I'm going to take a couple more comments and remarks before we go into audience questions. So just to kind of wrap things up, you know, obviously we're here at COP28. We know that the UAE has net zero goals that have been pledged, as have many countries. And one of the things that we keep hearing again and again is that to get there, to get to net zero by 2050, it's the role of government, of the private sector, and of civil society, of the consumer. So as we look at the next question, where would you say that the biggest challenge is going to be? So just so everybody knows as well, we actually have a survey on the pavilion over by the pledge wall, where we're actually gathering data about consumer habits and consumer behavioral change, and what would it take for people to become more sustainable? You know, what are they willing to sacrifice? What are they willing to change? Because consumers, civil society has a role to play, as does government, as does private sector and companies. So the question is, what do you think is the biggest barrier that we face to reach our goals of sustainable cities, sustainable built environment, to help us to reach net zero? Starting with Sumaya, and then we'll...
I really think we need a shift, a mind shift, really. And I, again, go back to this connection to place, because once you feel connected, you really care about where you are. And here we're a nation, I mean, of very generous and very giving and very hospitable community. So it's not difficult for us to give and sacrifice, you know, to give to others. So the more we feel connected as a community, the more we start to really care about what we're doing and the impact, and take responsibility for the impact that we have. And I think, you know, there's, I mean, without sounding, being, we're very privileged in this region, and governments have been very generous, whether it's subsidizing, you know, housing or electricity or whatever. But I think we need to take responsibility for our actions. We're not being cared for. I mean, if you're a child being cared for by somebody else, you relegate the responsibility to them. So we need to really take ownership of our, I mean, you know, our homes, our communities, our cities, to create that change. Thank you.
Well, I think maybe one of the challenges that we might face, honestly, is again that sustainability is very personal. It's been established by the government, and it's an international target, as we know. Now it becomes, if we are going to cascade it down to the individual, responsible organizations to deploy it, and the people who are going to implement it, and all the way to the individuals and their own household, it becomes very personal. We need to adapt into it. We need to believe in it. It should become part of our DNA, honestly, in order to move forward and to hand it over to our, children and our, grandkids later on, because it's something that we are going to hand over to the next generation. It's not about what do we do today to gain today. It's about to gain in the future. You'll invest in today's built environment for a longer term gain. This is basically how we need to structure the understanding, whether it's through the educational, institutions for all the generations, for all the grades in the system, whether it's through the commercial and the office space. I remember the first initiative we had in Solutions Plus came all the way from our strategic objective, that it's a free from plastic bottle of water. It's a cultural thing that we need to adapt into. So another thing is that we need to also consider is the support from the regulatory bodies to be more, gearing towards this direction of implementing the sustainability measures. Today, in certain areas, it's becoming optional, but we really need to see more of that, how it can be implemented and, become more robust in terms of applicability on ground fields. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add that we create demand. If we change the mindset and we start to really care about our environment, then we'll create the demand, and then we can change things. This is the only way, I think.
Look, I would say this is a country that we're blessed with visionary leadership, but also a community that believes in that leadership and comes behind them. So, and when they want to act quickly, they can act quickly. Remember the day we all woke up and read that we were all going to have a Saturday, Sunday weekend? And 3 weeks later, we went to work on Friday and stayed home on Sunday? That took about 3 weeks. That was a massive cultural shift. 15 years ago, Abu Dhabi implemented Estadama. And it's a building rating system based on pearls. So 1 to 5 pearls, loosely based on lead. It's been 1 pearl has been the requirement for 15 years. If tomorrow it became 2 pearls, yeah, the contractors and the architects would whine a little bit. Then they'd all go, oh, I guess we're going to do this. There are no plastic bottles inside a COP right now. Bravo. If we announced that in 3 weeks there'd be no plastic bottles inside the country, there'd be no plastic bottles inside the country. The private sector will adapt to the regulatory environment. The financiers, the money will come. If there's regulatory certainty, if everyone's going to build, a 3-pearl Estadama building, if that's the minimum, the private sector will respond. The money will come when there's regulatory certainty. This country can act. We've seen it in renewable energy. We've seen it in a lot of other areas. There are steps to take.
Well, I'm optimistic about the future of sustainability in the country, and I think we are on the right track. If we talk about awareness, we have exceeded that stage of public awareness, and everybody is aware right now. And then we have initiatives and successful initiatives, not only in buildings. For example, if we talk about Al-Ittihad Rail, and it is the federal rail that crossed the country, and it will contribute positively to enhance the environment and the emissions. And finally, we need to lead by example and provide more examples, and we appreciate the efforts or our achievements. I think, and maybe everybody share with me the same idea, we are now learning more from our kids than ourselves. And their initiatives and insights inspire us to think positively about the future. And this is what makes me optimistic about the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was such a brilliant way to end all of your comments. We've learned so much. And I think just to sum it up, education and awareness is definitely the first step. as is obviously a combination of making it the default, making it the policy rather than making it optional. And then being innovative, finding these amazing new solutions that are here in nature as well. Do we have time for any questions before we wrap up? A couple of questions from the audience. Anybody would like to make a comment as well?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, everyone. Of course, two of my top favorite people on stage, so I will not ask you guys. I think I will ask Steve. Yeah. I'll ask you, Steve, about materials. You have asked us about the lead rating and so on. But the most important part before we talk about lead is, are we utilizing spaces significantly? From my humble experience in government buildings, entities receive their buildings and there is no significant percentage of utilizing the space according to the design. So this is something crucial. It also applies to houses, our own houses. How many of you guys have changed the use of spaces depending on many reasons? So design that is according to requirements and according to actual use. This is important before we talk about spaces. And the other thing is there is a shift in space requirements as well. We have seen this through, for example, in Abu Dhabi, houses, the land plot area were huge. It was 300 by 300 square feet. And then there was a shift to 200 by 200. Then it came to 150 square feet. And then it reached now 100 by 120. And there might be another shift as well. So people still talk about bigger spaces, bigger requirements. So I think the question would go around with some of you, but design requirements is the crucial before talking about LEED and all of the requirements that are related to sustainability. So basically, your sustainable needs of the space itself.
Look, I think that's an interesting point. And I would say that the private sector is ahead. That the private sector, especially post-COVID, we've seen real changes quickly from the private sector on, okay, how much space do we need, more flexible work arrangements. They've always, and there's the profit motive, whether you're in the UAE, or whether you're in the US, or whether you're in Japan, drives some efficiency that the government sector will not always have. So our goal is to try and provide that space that is as efficient as possible, so that it's easy to occupy, it's easy to sit out. If you come to a lot of our buildings, they're squares. They're squares. A lot of them are simple designs with facades around them that are designed to decrease the amount of energy consumed there. In fact, it's not exactly the question you were asking, but I will talk about the Siemens building. It's the first LEED Platinum building in Abu Dhabi. And what they said is, yeah, they expected to consume less. What they didn't expect is the temperature would be the same across the floor. Because right now, usually, if you have a wall of windows, where's it hottest in any office building?
South and southwest.
Yeah, well, at the corner office, right? And who sits in the corner office? The boss. And so he turns the temperature down and down and down. So you have... And it's usually women, and we'll talk about this, but using space heaters and wearing sweaters in summer in the UAE indoors, right? This happens. Or when you go to the movies, you're taking a sweater to the movie theater. It's the space, and it's also, or when I walk into a hotel room in this country and it's 17 degrees, and the first thing I want to do is go open the window because it's so cold inside. There are ways we can operate buildings better, yes, with more efficient space planning, but then with also better operations. And I think that this is, you design a building, you put people in it, but you have to operate it, you have to maintain it, you have to focus on the life cycle.
I think it's more related to a discipline that we even learned throughout, the academic field is called performance-based design. It's based on the occupancy of the building, the typology of the use, the age of the people who will be in this building, the operating hours of the building. So all these attributes, you put them together as part of your integral design process, and by then you come up with at least sustainable spectrum when you design the building. As you said, it's mostly now people are designing their houses not even thinking about 1% of what honestly we talked about. Still, people are preferring a bedroom size of 8 by 6 meters. A lot of unused spaces within our household, big reception areas and so forth. So if it's performance-based design, starting from the people who are going to occupy it to the operating systems within the building, this is ultimately going to support moving forward with implementing the sustainable measures. Yeah.
And also, I think we need to build flexibility in our buildings because things change. COVID happened and that impacted the way that we work. Our homes, a home that you need when you have small children is very different to when you have teenagers or kids with their own children. So I think for the longevity of any building, you need to build in flexibility for it to adapt to different use throughout its time.
And I think we talk about efficiency of using our resources. So land is a resource, the house and its size is a resource, our time, our age, our money, all of these are resources, beside the energy. So the optimal or the best use of our resources could lead us to a more sustainable design in our life. That's it.
Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists, Your Excellency, Steve, Azza, Sumaya. You've been really enlightening today, and thank you for our audience for joining this conversation. Please do stay. We have another session starting in 5 minutes. Obviously, when you talk about urban planning, you have to talk about transport and mobility. So please stay for the next session. We have some fantastic speakers talking about transport and mobility as well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.